G'day and welcome to another Space Engineers Autopilot tutorial. Last time we had a look at how to make a basic autopilot drone. It was able to follow a few waypoints, it was able to dodge a few cliffs sometimes, but there wasn't much useful we could do with it. A drone set up that way would get to a point, sit there, run out of fuel and crash. It wouldn't be able to do much else. So what we're going to do today is build an automated defense drone that's going to be able to take out any pesky wolves that happen to be around here. And I know there's some here. I know they're there. Even though I can't see them, I know they're there. The way we're going to build this drone is like so. I'm going to go through the full build of this and then how we can actually make the thing work. Pop down our landing gear. Let's build our extension so that we can have room to build. And the first thing we're going to start with is our connector. The connector in this case is a bit more important than usual, and I'll explain why when we place our remote control. On top of the connector, place a conveyor sorter, and we're going to need the sorter, and we're going to need it replaced the other way to what I just did. No, wait, I did have it the right way. The reason we're going to need this conveyor sorter is because we don't want our drone to run out of fuel and we don't want it to run out of ammunition. We're going to need a system that's going to pull fuel and ammunition into the ship every time it docks with a connector. And we're going to use the conveyor sorter to do this. This will mean that, see, there's a wolf. There's one. They are here. Hello, Wolfie. You're not going to have much longer to go. We may not need the sorter under all circumstances, but I've found that pulling using the sorter is a bit more aggressive and happens a bit quicker, which means our docking cycle doesn't need to be as long. On top of the conveyor sorter, we can place a conveyor junction, and we want it lined up so that the sorter will get one of the large ports. Pop it down like so. Then, because we're using a cargo filling method in order to get our fuel on board to continue to provide power, we're going to use reactors as our power supply, not batteries. If we used batteries, we'd have to set them to recharge every time the ship docked, know how much charge we needed to accumulate, and go through a bunch of steps that really make this whole process a lot more complex than just using reactors. Next up, on top of this connector, and the one on the other side, this conveyor port I should say, we're going to place our weapons. We've got 2 Gatling turrets on there. Then, in order to make our docking sequence work nicely, I'm going to use 2 timers. And now for the important part. If we're going to be docking in gravity and using the connector on the bottom to do the docking, we need to place our remote control directly above the connector. This makes things a whole lot simpler, as the ship can approach this connector from any direction and just move straight down onto the connector if the remote control is directly above the connector. Now that we've placed that, let's get a gyroscope on there, and finally we need an antenna. The last thing that's missing is a couple of thrusters in each direction. We don't need this ship to go particularly quickly, so we'll just use a single directional thruster for each sideways movement. And the drone will maintain this orientation if we don't change any of the default settings, which means we only need an increased number of lifting thrusters. So I'll pop 2 there and 2 around here. Lastly, we need a couple of downward thrusters. Well, we only need 1, but I'll put 2 just for symmetry's sake. We do need to provide the autopilot with these downward thrusters in order for it to work properly. Now that we've got all that, we need to provide a little bit of power to this thing, and I'm going to do that this way. Because I'm in survival mode, but I've gone to Alt F10, which is the Space Master mode, and enabled creative mode tools, I can actually spawn in some uranium. So I'll press Shift F10, go down to our items, select uranium ingot, and spawn it into our targeted container, which will put it straight into that nuclear reactor. Then, if we go underneath, we can do the same and spawn a few kilograms into the connector as well. Now all those are online. We'll grab our uranium out of here so we don't drop it. And now we can actually disconnect this ship from its point. Oh, that was unexpected. All right, we've got a drone. We've got an autopilot on board and we want to set it up. I've actually already set up waypoints around here, but I'm going to show you how to set them up yourself. If we go to our... Oh, I should probably land because my jetpack will cut out once I take control of the ship. If you press Shift K, we've got our small grid. We can take control of it. You can see now I'm piloting it. We can actually move this down onto our connector here. We want to get it into a docking position. Once it's in the docking position, we press K, we create a GPS marker, new from current position, and this will be main dock, since I've got the other dock set up as well. Then we want another waypoint directly above it. Doesn't really matter how far. I found that it works nicely if we're about 15 meters above it, so that should probably do. New from current position, and this will be our docking approach. So now we've got that set up. I can now stop controlling the drone, and we can set up a few more things with its autopilot. What we're planning on doing is getting our drone to approach this main dock approach GPS marker and then move straight down onto our connector so that it can refuel from the base. If we go into our drone, we can start setting it up to do that. Run down to our remote control. We don't want collision avoidance on for the docking procedure, but we can have it on for the other ones. So we'll put it on. We definitely want precision mode on, otherwise it's not going to be able to dock. You could switch this on and off through the cycle of the waypoints, but I don't think in the setting we're using this, which is to protect us against wolves, we really need the drone to be moving quickly. We'll put our flight mode to one way. That way when it reaches the dock, it'll automatically switch itself off. We want our speed limit a fair bit down. If we leave it up at 100, the docking procedure doesn't tend to work. So, let's order our patrol route. We'll start with 1, 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Then we'll go to main dock approach, and then we'll go to main dock. When we reach main dock approach, we're going to want to change something. We're going to want to make sure that the remote control has collision avoidance off. And in order to reset that status so that it doesn't have it for all of the other ones, we can set up our actions at waypoint 1 to make sure it turns collision avoidance back on. This will be nice and useful if we've got a number of different drones running around that are all using the same docking location. That way, when they're not approaching the dock, they shouldn't run into each other. Next up, at dock, we're going to want this to start timer 1. And timer 1, we need to set up now. We'll set it on silent, set its delay down to 2 seconds. Need to leave it a little, I like to leave it a little bit of time. It's not absolutely necessary, but I do like to leave a little bit of time for the ship to settle into its docking position so that we definitely get a lock with the connector. And that's what we're going to tell the timer block to do. Set up actions, set the connector to lock, and we're going to set it to start timer block 2. Then we jump down to timer block 2. We'll give the ship maybe 5 seconds should be enough docking time. We'll set up our actions, and this one will set the autopilot back on the remote control. And now everything is pretty much good to go. I hope. Otherwise I'm going to be eating my words. So, to run through all that again, the ship's going to take off and head to patrol point 1, and at patrol point 1, the remote control will switch on collision avoidance. It'll then head to 2, 3, 4, 5, then it'll get to the main dock approach. At main dock approach, it'll turn collision avoidance off. And then when it reaches the dock, it'll set the first timer block to start. That first timer block will cause the connector to lock, and it'll trigger timer 2. Timer 2 will give us 5 seconds of docking time, and then it'll disconnect the connector, and it'll restart the autopilot. And I did do that. I forgot to disconnect the connector part. Unlock. Now, setting up our refuel scenario. So when we get to refuel, we want the sorter block to pull the right stuff in. There's our conveyor sorter. Set it to whitelist, set it to drain all. And we want the 25 by 184 millimeter and uranium ingots. So it'll pull all of those out of any attached inventory that it can access. And now we can set this to go. Before we do that though, so that we can follow it a little more easily, I'm going to hop in a chair. Remote control, autopilot on. We can see we're heading over to patrol point 1. Then we'll head around the circuit and jump down onto the dock. I'm actually going to hop out of the chair and I'm going to put some ammunition into this connector. That way we'll prove that all of this is working. Let's grab some 25 by 184. Let's put 100 of them in there. Oops, forgot to do the spawn into container. There we go. 100 boxes of ammunition. Let's go back to our drone and hop in. Now that we've reached patrol point 5, we're going to head towards main dock approach. Let's jump into our control panel, head down to our remote control, and see what's meant to happen next. At main dock approach, collision avoidance should turn off. It's currently on. Let's see if that works out as we expect. It's going to line up our remote control directly onto that GPS point. Yeah, we heard something happen there. Remote control, collision avoidance off. We've now docked to the station. The yellow timer is the one that's counting down. And we've now taken, we should take off and head towards patrol point 1 again. In our inventory, we have ammunition in our turrets. So now if any dogs get in range, we should see these turrets start firing. Oh, there we go. Don't know why it hasn't picked that one on the ground. Oh, there we go. Let's make these shoot a bit more downward. Going all this way out, they're probably going to miss a lot. So let's drop the range down to, let's say 250 meters. And we now have a functional wolf defense drone. It's not going to stop and hold station in order to kill stuff, and it's probably not going to be hugely effective against other airborne threats. But it's relatively cheap to make. It's completely automated. It will continue to refuel and rearm as long as the connector is there and is stocked with ammunition and uranium that it can access. So it's all pretty much hands off now. I can hop out. That's just going to keep flying around as long as there's fuel for it to keep flying. Just kind of cool. So right now I've set the drone up so that it's got a maximum speed of 100 meters per second. Collision avoidance is still on, but it'll turn itself off once it reaches the main dock approach. And I've turned off precision mode, so it's going to potentially move quite quickly. We do generally need precision mode on in order for the dock to work, but let's see if it works without it. Come down. It's heading towards main dock approach now. And... oh, hey, it's actually worked. This thing's more robust than I gave it credit for. But you saw it slap into that connector pretty hard. Generally speaking, for your heavier drones especially, if you're thinking a cargo drone or something like that, you're going to want it to have a little more of a gentle landing onto the connector. Now, if you don't want to put this whole thing together yourself, I've actually come up with one. Here is our completed anti-wolf drone. This is actually set up, all done inside. If we have a look, we've got our remote control set up with our waypoints. All you need to do is have GPS markers with those names, or put your own GPS markers in there. Have landing approach and dock named that way after creating them like we did at the start. With the ship docked, create the dock waypoint, and then move straight up and create the landing approach. Then you should be able to spawn this ship in, and if we press Shift K, we can then go to our terminal, go to our remote control, turn it on, and it'll start working automatically. It'll be able to grab anything we put into this container. So let's spawn 100 boxes in there. They're now in there. Once it completes its cycle, it'll come and it'll refuel here. If you want to have a closer look yourself, this little drone is going to be available on the workshop. I'll make sure it's up by the time the video's up, so that you can go and look at it yourself. Rather than just take my word for it, let's have a look at what would happen with a drone if we try and make it land where its remote control is not above the connector directly. So we'll pop a connector there, doesn't need to actually function. And let's make a very, very ugly practice ship. This will make it very easy to demonstrate what the problem is with not having the remote control block directly above the connector. If we create a GPS marker where the remote control is right now, it's slightly off center from this direction. If we wanted to make sure that this could dock every time consistently, we're going to need to place other markers in such a way that the ship orients itself this way every time. Because if it comes in from this side, it's not going to line up directly over the connector. And we can make this even more dramatic by doing this. If it's all this way out, you can imagine if we do this. Let's take control again. Oh, I believe our guns are doing their trick. So if this ship approaches from this direction, we're going to need a GPS marker all the way out there. If it approaches facing this way, we're going to need a GPS marker over here. Whereas if the remote control block is directly above the connector, it should work every single time. And all we need to do is have a waypoint directly above the connector for a docking approach. We probably don't even really need that. The ship will most likely dock most times without that extra waypoint. But I find that that waypoint has made it more reliable for me, so I stick with it. So there we have it. An automated defense drone and another automated defense drone. Both of them doing their little patrol route. Both of them, as long as we keep fuel in these connectors or in the systems they're connected to, can keep flying forever. As long as this one doesn't crash and destroy the connector with how fast it's coming in, since I haven't set it back to its normal settings. If you've got any tips, tricks, problems, etc. you've had with Autopilot, I'd love to hear about them. So let me know in the comments. The next video in this series is going to be about how to build a cargo drone, so using this technique to shuttle back and forth, and a few of the problems that I've run into and partially why I've stuck with running this autopilot in a natural gravity field. It's actually made things easier. With a new major update just having been released, there is plenty more to come. So I'll see you then.